So the Legends of Runeterra 0.9.4 patch notes are here, bringing a lot of different changes, a lot of buffs that were unexpected, and some nerfs as well. So I'm going to go over all those. So these are all of just the buffs and nerfs. I'm not going over all the clarity changes. Riot changed a lot of cards that are changing the clarity of text on cards just to make them make more sense. So like, for instance, the Bright Steel formation, they just removed barrier on it. It still gets barrier when you play it, so the card functions the same. It's just you can't have double barrier, so it doesn't matter. So there's a bunch of just changes. They talk about Shark Chariot and all that. So if you want the full patch notes, down below in the description, I have a link to the official patch notes from Riot. Go there. They're there so you can read them all. But these are just the balance changes. So let's get into them. So the first one is interesting, and it kind of caught me by surprise, and it's a change to Draven. So before, it leveled up with I've struck twice with a spinning axe. Now it's I've struck with 2 total spinning axes. So you still have to have the axes on him. It's interesting. Riot said that they want to provide players with more windows and incentives to use spinning axes on Draven himself, in addition to rummaging them away or pumping other units. I don't think this really changes much about how he gets played, because you're usually not playing him to level up Draven. I joke about it all the time. I never see the leveled up version of him. I feel like this is harder to level him up, so it feels like a nerf, I think. It's weird. It's interesting. I didn't expect it, but I don't think it changes how any of us are playing Draven anyways. So let's go to the next one. All right, so the next one we have is pretty sweet, and it's a buff to Yasuo. So Yasuo is not really seeing a whole lot of play. He's easy to kill, and so what they're doing is they're giving him another point of health. So now instead of a 4-3, he's a 4-4, and when he's leveled up, he's a 5-5. This should definitely make him a lot more viable. He won't die to things like Get Excited, harder to kill, especially on a quick attack champion. So it's pretty sweet. This could actually make Yasuo stun decks semi-viable, especially as we start getting more and more card reveals. If we get more things that have stun and recall on them, maybe he could become pretty strong. For anyone that played the closed beta, he was actually a very powerful force in closed beta while people were learning archetypes and stuff. So I mean, his effect is very strong. If he stays around, he's very powerful. So giving him an extra point of health, maybe we'll see. Maybe he becomes semi-viable. This next one is a buff that I am very, very excited about, a card very near and dear to my heart, and that's Calista. So before, when they reworked Calista, they changed her from where she had to have see 3 allies die to where she had to see 4 allies die. Well, they went back, and now she only has to see 3 allies die to level up. Her level up ability is very, very cool. It's just, it is pretty hard to get it to work. I think, like, it may seem like a small change, but going from 4 allies to 3 is actually very considerable. Now you only need to do something like play 1 haunted relic and have the ephemeral units die to level her up. It's just a lot easier. I've played so much of her. I was just playing a Calista Bannerman deck, and honestly, I think this is a bigger change than people are thinking, and it may make her a lot more viable because her ability is so sick. It's kind of hard to pull off, and she dies so fast in her pre-leveled up form as a 4-3. So maybe this makes my dream of Calista being awesome more realizable? Realizable? Is that a word? Next one. All right, so Katarina got a buff, and this one's very interesting as well that I didn't see. Doesn't see a whole lot of play. You have to sink so much mana into her ability, and there's not always a huge payoff for playing her. I mean, obviously rallying is sweet. She's hard to kill, but like, you're still having to pay that mana every single turn to get her effect. So now they added on, when you play her, she creates a fleeting Blade's Edge in hand. This is interesting because Blade's Edge it can have a lot of things, especially with the new Freljord champion that was revealed coming out. So maybe we see this go in more of like an Aristocrats Crimson deck where you want the Blade's Edges. Who knows? It's interesting. I'm very curious to see if this increases her play rate. It's a good thing all around because, again, Katarina is just not seeing a whole lot of play. So very cool. One I didn't see coming, and I like seeing this. Next, we have a change to the Laurent duelist. He is going from a 3-2 stat line to a 4-2 stat line, making him a little more aggressive. Riot said in the post that they wanted him to be able to attack when he gives something challenger, but then like you never want to swing in with him because his 3-2 stat line just kind of sucked. So now he can actually trade into things and be a little more aggressive. So this could maybe see the card see more play. I've seen it's been a while, but there were fringe cases where he saw play, especially in expeditions. He's pretty strong. So this is better. It's a buff, stat line boost. Nothing super exciting, but who knows? Maybe it makes it less butt. We have another Demacian card. This one got a little bit of a decrease in power. That's the Vanguard Bannerman, a card we've all seen many times, and it's just insanely powerful. So what they did is they made his allegiance buff only other allies and not himself, so he stays a 3/3. So it makes him a little easier to kill. He still gets the effect. It doesn't really change the card. I don't think he gets played any less because it's still insane buffing your whole board for 4 mana. But yeah, a little easier to kill. It makes the decks a little bit easier to deal with. It's kind of like a 1/1 nerf to his stat line if you look at it at the change. I think it's good. The card definitely needed changed. We'll see if it's still as degenerate as it's been lately. But yeah, a little decrease in power for the Bannerman. Next, we have the Noxus card, Blood for Blood. It's getting a little bit of a buff. Instead of 3 mana, it is now only 2 mana. The card just doesn't really see much play. We've seen cards change 1 mana before and suddenly are just much more viable, so we'll see if this happens. The card is sweet. All of the Crimson decks play it. I love it in the Vladimir Braum decks. I've been trying to mess with Vladimir Demacia decks as well, so I play this and that. So we called it a Tough Dad Vlad. Anyways, yeah, it's a very cool card. I think at 2 mana it is a lot better, especially since it's such a cheap card. When you have a card that's low mana to begin with, like decreasing the mana cost anymore is like more of a substantial buff than it looks on paper, even though it's digital. But yeah, good buff. Maybe we see a little bit. It feels like they're kind of pushing the aristocrats, Crimson, damage your own dudes archetype a little bit. I mean, we saw it with the buff to Katarina, the new Freljord champion, some of the new Freljord cards coming out, and this, I don't know, it's a fun deck, so we'll see if it gets a little better. We have another Noxus card getting buffed that also just doesn't see any play, and that's Caddo or Caddo or Caddo the Arm. I don't know how to say his name, so we're gonna say Caddo the Arm. He is getting a health increase from 3 to 4. Again, the three health is just so easy to deal with. It just dies instantly. Get excited, just pops it when you play the card. So now at 4 health, it's a substantial buff. Going from that 3 to the 4 stat line is actually quite a bit. So this might make the card more viable. He's a very sweet card. It's just at 5 mana, having 3 health, he just dies instantly. So we'll see if this is enough of a buff to get it played. The card is very sweet. I'd like to see cards utilize this. I'd like to see a little more interesting Noxus decks that aren't just 1-drops go face. So going face is sweet, but in a like cool overwhelmed mid-range deck, this might be very cool. So good buff. Yeah, 3 to 4 is actually pretty decent. These next few card buffs are kind of like, I feel like Riot is doing them specifically just for me. But the first one we have is the Avarice and Trapper is getting a health increase from 2 to 3. I've been playing a bunch of Yeti decks recently. They've all been horrible. It's just not good. But the Trapper, he's one, it feels so bad to play him as a 2/2. Like it just, everything kills it. Mystic Shot, all of the 1-drops that have 2 damage. Like he just dies to everything. So 3 health actually lets you be able to play him a little more defensively. He survives combat probably at least 2 rounds instead of dying the first round you play him. His effect is also really cool, like a 1 mana 5/5 somewhere in your deck. For the Yetis, hopefully we see more Yeti cards and more Yeti synergy in the future, because it is a cool tribe. It's just not good. So hopefully this helps a bit. I know it makes it a little more playable. Decks probably aren't going to start just slotting it in, but if you are trying to make Yetis work, he's sweet, and now he doesn't suck as much. The next one is a buff that I've been asking for a while now, and that's a buff to the Starlet Seer. Another really cool card, but again, she was a 2/2. Now she's going to a 2/3. +1 health is huge. Going from 2 to 3 is massive, just like going from 3 to 4 is really big. You're, changing the things that can kill it from a mystic shot up to now to needing to get excited or whatever, The card is so cool, but she just needs her effect to be, she has to be around for a while for the effect to really work. I personally would love to see this card be like a 5-cost card with a massive stat line, so she just stays around, or like with barrier or something, but this is pretty sweet. I think a 2/3 is an elegant change. She doesn't get any play at all, so maybe we start seeing a deck that can utilize her. Maybe it can go in that Yeti's deck, who knows, but it is a good change. I like this, and I don't think anyone's complaining that the Starlet Seer is getting buffed, so I like this a lot. So next we have a buff to the Weirding Stones. So this was one of my favorite cards in closed beta at all, when it was a 2-mana card. So it did get nerfed from, it was before a 3-mana 0/4, and then they made it a 3-mana 0/3. They're putting it back up to a 3-mana 0/4. The card is near unplayable as a 0/3, but as a 0/4, I think it's actually pretty good. They talked about how Freljord Ramp is a thing that as an archetype that they like to see more of. When I say they, I mean Riot. I keep saying that. But Riot said in there, they're increasing its stat line because we only ever see Catalyst of Aeons get played because it's just strictly better. So now maybe we will see more of a big dudes Freljord deck. It's such a cool idea. I loved this card so much, especially when you're playing stuff like Tryndamere, when you're playing, just all your big things. It's pretty sweet. Now that we're seeing, more cool late game Freljord units as well. I really like this. I love this. This is a buff that I've been asking for a very, very long time because I love Weirding Stones. I think the card is sweet. So I think the reverting it back to 0/4, I think is very good. I am happy with this one quite a bit. All right, next we have a Piltover and Zon card getting a buff, and that's the Shady character. This is an interesting one, but it makes a lot of sense. So he was a 1/1. When you play him, you pick a follower. He transforms into it. So they're making it, instead of a 1/1, they're bumping its health up to a 1/3. Riot said they, every time, it's very often you play this in the 1 health that you can kill it before the effect happens because it's a play effect, just like a Vile Feast or whatever on it. So they're trying to make it to where he actually gets to have its effect happen because it is a 4-drop with a cool effect. It's not seeing any play, but maybe it being able to survive a bit will help quite a bit. It's interesting just because this isn't a card that's been on my radar, but it is really cool. So we'll see if the Shady character sees any play now. And finally, we have a nerf to the Frenzied Skitterer. This is another card that we're all intimately familiar with. His stat line is just insane as a 3/3, so now he's getting the nerf to a 3/2. The effect stays the same. It still has fearsome, still can reduce your enemies, units, buffs your dudes. So that stays the same, but they did make him a 3/2. I think a lot of people are complaining, that because some of these got leaked ahead of time. They're like, oh, it's still really powerful. Yes, it is still very powerful. I don't think they should nerf the card into the ground. I think it should still be a good card. But at a 3/2, again, like I've talked about on the other stat increases and decreases, now something like a Mystic Shot can clean it up. Now, a lot of times, isn't going to be able to survive through 2 combat phases, especially on a fearsome unit. Dying in 1 combat is very important. If it gets multiple combats, the value just gets to accrue itself with fearsome. So I think it's a very good change. I wouldn't be surprised if it does stay the same and people do continue to complain about it. We could see it get changed in another way somehow as well. But yeah, good nerf. I think this is also solid. The card did need a little change. The 3/3 fearsome's kind of nuts, especially when it can fog your opponent's entire turn sometimes. So yeah, good change. We'll see if that gets changed again. This is a card that I could see being on their radar because it is pretty strong. So those are all the buffs and nerfs. They did talk about in the patch notes is they're keeping an eye on Ezreal and also Karma, 2 cards that we all talk about all the time, especially if you're involved in discussions on meta. We talk about him on my podcast Runeterra Radio all the time as well, just because especially Ezreal Karma together, the deck is very, very strong. It leads to a lot of OTKs. So they are watching both Ezreal and Karma. So before you start whining and yelling, they know, Riot knows that they're powerful. They're on the lookout. So yeah, those are all of the changes. Hopefully this helped you a bit, put some stuff into context, let you have a, I know sometimes it's easier to digest things like big patch notes like this when someone's going through them. But let me know in the comments if this helps you, if you enjoy these videos, if you hate them, all of that, just let me know. I like open discussion because you guys are amazing. That's all I had for you. I'll keep doing these for every patch unless you guys all hate it and tell me to kick rocks. But until next time, you stay saucy. My Teemo cosplay. He's got 78 puff caps in there in deck. And we have this guy. I'm gonna choose not to block. Got him. It does kill him. Thank you so much for watching my video. If you like what you saw, it would mean a ton if you would hit that subscribe button, hit the little bell notification to be notified when I post some videos, share this with your friends, all that kind of stuff. You're amazing. I love you. And until next time, you stay saucy.